The sound of fingers snapping next to your ear is something you never forget. It's sharp, demanding, and when it happens 3 inches from your head while you're studying a complex fiber optic routing diagram, it's basically a declaration of war. Hey, Tech Grandpa, Earth to Tech Grandpa. I'm Jason Martinez, 49 years old, and I didn't look up immediately. I was staring at the schematic for a Phase 3 redundancy loop that was supposed to keep the 42nd floor of Phoenix Financial Tower from melting down during another brutal Dallas summer. My finger was tracing the line where the backup cooling system connected to the primary server room. It was a delicate ecosystem of power and precision that I had personally designed, negotiated, and installed over the past 26 years, starting right after my Navy discharge. The snapping came again, faster this time, like some kind of impatient metronome. "I know you can hear me," the voice said. It was Ashley Reynolds. Of course it was Ashley. Ashley was 24, wore designer athleisure that cost more than my monthly truck payment, and had the job title Director of Digital Innovation. As far as I could tell, that meant her daddy Gary was the CFO of the holding company, and she got to play startup CEO with other people's money. Classic nepotism wrapped in millennial buzzwords. I finally turned my chair around. "Can I help you, Ashley?" "The Wi-Fi," she said, waving her manicured hand at the glass conference room behind her where 5 other kids in matching hoodies were staring at a frozen Zoom screen. "It's like totally lagging. We're pitching the Series B guys in 3 minutes. Just fix it." I took a slow breath. I'm a 49-year-old man in a pressed button-down shirt. I don't wear a company lanyard. I don't carry a repair toolkit. I was sitting at this conference table because the lighting was better for reading infrastructure blueprints, not because I was waiting for help desk tickets. "I'm not IT, Ashley," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm reviewing the fiber trunk specifications for the renewal contract. If you're having latency issues, you need to submit a ticket through the proper channels." Ashley laughed. It was this harsh, barking sound that probably worked great on her college sorority sisters, but had zero effect on someone who'd spent 8 years dealing with Navy officers. "Excuse me?" "I don't submit tickets to the help desk, Grandpa. My father pays a fortune for this lease. Just reboot the router or whatever. Do your job." I turned back to my schematic. "I am doing my job, and I don't have admin access to your local network." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Ashley slammed her hand down on the mahogany table, rattling my coffee cup and sending ripples across the surface. The entire open-plan office went silent. The marketing team lowered their phones. The developers stopped typing. Even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to pause. "You know what?" Ashley shouted, her face flushing red like a thermometer hitting critical temperature. "I am so over the attitude from the support staff in this building. Okay, Boomer, the Wi-Fi is broken and you're sitting here doing nothing. You're useless. Actually useless." She pointed at the door with a perfectly manicured finger that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I'll have HR send your final paycheck. Go." I froze, not out of fear, but out of pure scientific fascination. She was firing me. She actually thought she had the authority to fire me. It was like watching someone try to fire gravity or cancel the laws of thermodynamics. I looked at her. I looked at the silent office watching us like we were some kind of reality TV show. I looked at the folder under my hand, the one containing the infrastructure renewal contract that was the only reason her little AI startup had military-grade power redundancy and fiber optic speeds that most Fortune 500 companies could only dream about. "You're firing me?" I asked, just to have it on the record. Sometimes you need to let people dig their own graves completely before you hand them the shovel. "I'm firing you," Ashley spat, crossing her arms like a toddler who just declared bedtime was canceled. "Pack your stuff and get out. Now." I stood up slowly, methodically. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Innovate Labs, but rather the independent infrastructure contractor for the entire Phoenix Financial Tower. I didn't mention that the tech grandpa she just screamed at held the master key to every system keeping her business alive. I didn't point out that she had just terminated the single most important vendor relationship her company had. I simply closed my laptop with a quiet click. I capped my pen with deliberate precision. I picked up my leather portfolio, leaving the unsigned renewal contract sitting in the center of the table like a landmine with the pin pulled. "Understood," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly across the silent office. "Good luck with the Series B pitch, Ashley." I walked to the elevator bank, my footsteps echoing in the unnatural quiet. I could feel 60 pairs of eyes on my back watching this slow-motion train wreck unfold. I didn't rush. I pressed the call button, waited for the familiar chime, and stepped inside the pristine, German-engineered car. As the doors slid shut, I saw Ashley smugly high-fiving one of her hoodie buddies, thinking she had just shown everyone who was boss. The last thing I saw was her triumphant grin, completely oblivious to what she had just done. She hadn't shown anyone who was boss. She had just severed the artery keeping her company alive. She just didn't know it yet. But she was about to get a very expensive education in the difference between authority and power. The elevator ride down was smooth and quiet. Phoenix Financial Tower prides itself on those lifts. Whisper quiet, serviced monthly, German engineering at its finest. I know, they're serviced monthly because I sign every vendor contract in this building. I walked out into the lobby and nodded to Anthony, the security chief, who was monitoring the camera bank from his station behind bulletproof glass. Anthony's a good man. Former Marine, understands the value of protocol and proper procedures. "Afternoon, Mr. Martinez," Anthony said, looking up from his monitors. "Everything good on 42? "Not anymore, Anthony," I said, adjusting my portfolio strap. "Not anymore. Trouble with the startup kids again?" "You could say that." I paused at his desk. "Anthony, you might want to keep an eye on the cameras up there over the next few days. Things might get interesting." Anthony's weathered face creased into what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Copy that, sir." 10 minutes later, exactly enough time for me to walk across the street to Starbucks, order a black coffee, and claim a window seat with a perfect view of Phoenix Financial Tower. The chaos started upstairs. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the script because I had written the original procedures manual. I could practically set my watch by what was happening. Up on the 42nd floor, Scott, the building manager, was walking out of the service elevator. Scott's a solid guy in his late 50s, former union electrician who worked his way up to management. He wears suits that are slightly too big for his frame and has this habit of sweating when building operations go off schedule. Today he was carrying a notary stamp and a bottle of champagne, the good stuff, Dom Perignon, that the building owner reserved for major contract signings. Scott was there to celebrate the execution of the 10-year lease extension, a deal I had spent 8 months negotiating directly with Gary Reynolds. It was supposed to be a formality, a handshake moment over expensive champagne while the lawyers dotted I's and crossed T's. Scott walked into that glass conference room expecting to find me reviewing final details with the Innovate Labs team. Instead, he found Ashley and her crew still riding high on adrenaline, completely oblivious to the corporate equivalent of a nuclear bomb that had just been detonated in their midst. "Afternoon, folks," Scott said, trying to sound jovial despite the sweat already beading on his forehead. "Where's our man of the hour? We've got papers to sign and champagne to open." Ashley spun around in her ergonomic chair, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Who?" "Jason Martinez," Scott said, scanning the room like he was looking for a missing person. "He said he was finalizing the infrastructure details up here. We need to get the service rider signed before 5 p.m. or the grandfather clause on your cooling system expires at midnight." Ashley grabbed an energy drink from the mini fridge, some organic thing that probably cost more per ounce than premium gasoline. "Oh, him. The old guy with the serious attitude problem. Yeah, I fired him about 20 minutes ago. He couldn't even troubleshoot basic network issues." The room stopped breathing. It wasn't a quiet pause in conversation. It was the kind of absolute silence that happens right before a building collapses, when all the support beams have been cut, but gravity hasn't quite figured it out yet. Scott blinked hard, like someone had just spoken to him in ancient Greek. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that was already damp. "I'm sorry, Ashley." "You did what, exactly?" "I fired him," Ashley repeated slower, like she was explaining quantum physics to a kindergartner. "He was completely incompetent. Couldn't fix our Wi-Fi lag. When I asked him to do his job, he gave me this whole attitude about proper channels and admin access. Total dead weight." She gestured dismissively with her manicured hand. "So I told him to pack his stuff and leave. You're welcome, by the way. We need vendors who can actually solve problems, not make excuses." Scott stared at her. Then he stared at the empty chair where I should have been sitting. Then he stared at the unsigned contract sitting on the mahogany table like a loaded weapon. I could practically see his blood pressure spiking from across the street. Ashley, Scott said, his voice starting to tremble like a man who just realized he was standing on thin ice over very deep water. Jason Martinez isn't a vendor. Whatever. He was just some... Jason Martinez is the infrastructure systems engineer, Scott interrupted, his whisper somehow carrying more authority than her shouting. He's the independent contractor who owns the service agreements for your fiber trunk, your dedicated cooling loops, your backup power systems. His voice was rising as the full scope of the disaster became clear. He controls the building automation that keeps your servers from turning into very expensive paperweights. Scott grabbed the edge of the table for support, his knuckles going white. I manage the janitorial staff and building maintenance, Ashley. Jason Martinez decides whether this floor has power, cooling, and internet, and you just fired him. Ashley's confident smile started to falter around the edges. She looked at the folder on the table with growing suspicion. You're joking, right? He was sitting there with a laptop like some basic IT support guy. He was reviewing your lease renewal. Scott's voice cracked like a whip. You just terminated the person who was about to save your company $180,000 in retroactive utility penalties and give you locked-in rates for the next decade. Ashley's hand moved slowly toward the folder. She flipped it open with the hesitant motion of someone defusing a bomb. There on the first page, in bold Arial font that suddenly looked like an epitaph, Infrastructure Service Agreement, prepared by Jason Martinez, Senior Systems Engineer, Phoenix Infrastructure Holdings, LLC. Below that, in smaller text that might as well have been written in blood, military-grade redundancy systems, fiber optic backbone access, emergency power integration, and climate control optimization for high-density computing environments. Oh, Ashley said. It was barely a whisper, the sound of someone's world collapsing in real time. He walked out? Scott asked, already knowing the answer but hoping against hope that somehow this nightmare had a different ending. He said, "Understood," Ashley mumbled, her voice small and hollow. "And good luck with our pitch." Scott closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, he looked like a man who had just watched his retirement fund disappear. Oh God, Ashley. He accepted the termination of services. You didn't fire an employee or even a vendor. You just canceled your own infrastructure contract. He paused, letting that sink in. And he's a Navy veteran. Those guys don't bluff, and they sure as hell don't forget. Down on street level, I watched my phone buzz with incoming texts. Scott's message appeared first. "Please tell me she didn't actually fire you." Then came one from Brian Torres, the building's legal counsel. "Emergency. Need to talk ASAP." I took a slow sip of my coffee and didn't reply to either message. The door had closed. Now I was going to lock it, bolt it, and throw away the key. My office isn't on the 42nd floor with its panoramic views and glass walls. It's on the 6th floor, tucked behind the mechanical rooms and freight elevator banks where the real work gets done. It doesn't overlook the Dallas skyline. Instead, it has a view of the backup diesel generators and the massive cooling towers that hum with a low-frequency vibration I find incredibly soothing after 26 years in this business. This is the nervous system of the building. Those glass suites upstairs are just the pretty face that customers see. Down here is where the magic happens, where power flows, data moves, and climate gets controlled with military precision. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. The air was cool, clean, and carried the faint scent of ozone and high-grade electronics. I sat down at my desk, a solid oak slab that had belonged to my grandfather, now covered with three 32-inch monitors displaying real-time building systems data. I didn't feel angry. Anger is inefficient, unprofessional, and clouds judgment. What I felt was a profound sense of obligation to honor the contract termination that Ashley had so clearly articulated. She had been very specific about not wanting my services. As a professional with military training, I was duty-bound to respect her decision. I pulled the Innovate Labs service binder from the shelf, a 4-inch thick collection of agreements, addendums, and technical specifications that represented 3 years of careful negotiation and installation work. I opened it to Section 14B, Revocable Privileges and Shared Utilities. Here's what most tenants don't understand about modern commercial real estate. When you sign a lease for office space, you're not buying a complete package. The base lease covers 4 walls, a ceiling, basic electrical outlets, and access to municipal water. Everything else, high-speed fiber internet, dedicated HVAC systems for server rooms, biometric security integration, priority elevator access, those are add-on services. Premium amenities that require separate contracts with specialized vendors. Ashley had just fired the vendor who provided all of those services. I logged into the building management system with my root administrator credentials and pulled up the Innovate Labs account. 3 years of service history spread across my screens like a military operations map. Every system, every protocol, every piece of infrastructure that made their business possible was documented here. Step 1. Elevator Priority Protocol. Innovate Labs paid $2,400 monthly for VIP lift access, which meant when their employees swiped their badges in the lobby, one of the building's 8 elevators would immediately prioritize their call over standard tenant requests. During rush hours, this saved each employee about 6 minutes of waiting time. I found the service contract status and changed it from active to terminated by client request. Effective immediately, Ashley's team would wait in line like everyone else, including the dental clinic on the 12th floor and the accounting firm on the 15th. Step 2. Freight elevator access. According to my delivery schedule, Innovate Labs had $75,000 worth of new server equipment arriving Tuesday morning. Specialized racks that required the heavy-duty freight elevator to reach the 42nd floor safely. Access to that elevator required a digital authorization token that I issued personally for each delivery. I revoked their token. When that truck arrived Tuesday morning, they'd have 2 choices: carry those 200-pound server components up 42 flights of stairs, or reschedule delivery after negotiating a new service agreement. Good luck explaining that delay to their Series B investors. Step 3. Climate control systems. This was the nuclear option, and in Dallas summer heat, it was literally a matter of survival for their equipment. Standard office space gets basic HVAC, 72 degrees, adequate for humans and paperwork. But server rooms generate enormous heat loads that require dedicated chilled water loops, specialized air handlers, and redundant cooling systems to prevent tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment from overheating into very expensive paperweights. I pulled up the climate control schematic for the 42nd floor. The cooling flow to Suite 4200 was currently set to Priority Plus, maximum cooling capacity with automatic load balancing and emergency backup protocols. Military-grade reliability that I had personally designed and installed. I typed in the new parameters: revert to base building standard. The system would maintain basic human comfort levels but provide no additional cooling for high-density electronics. In about 90 minutes, as the afternoon Dallas heat climbed toward 94 degrees, their server room would start cooking. This wasn't sabotage. This wasn't revenge. This was simply removing premium services that had been explicitly rejected by the client representative. I was following proper termination procedures exactly as outlined in our service agreements. My landline rang. Only 4 people had this number: the building owner, the fire marshal, Brian Torres from legal, and my insurance company. The caller ID showed Brian's office. Jason. Brian's voice was tight with stress. I just got off a very uncomfortable conference call. Scott says Ashley Reynolds publicly fired you in front of 60 witnesses. Gary Reynolds is apparently having what sounds like a panic attack in his corner office downtown. She terminated our working relationship, I confirmed, putting the call on speaker while I navigated to the building security access database. Very clearly and publicly, she was quite emphatic about not wanting my services. Christ on a cracker, Brian muttered. Okay. What are you doing right now? And please tell me you're following proper termination protocols. I'm adhering strictly to the service contract termination procedures, I said. I'm systematically removing all premium amenities that were provided under our now voided agreement. I can't provide services without proper documentation and liability coverage. You know the insurance regulations, Brian. There was a long pause. How bad is this going to get? I looked at my screens, showing the real-time status of every system on the 42nd floor. Temperature rising, network traffic slowing, security protocols defaulting to base building standards. Well, I said, I hope they brought comfortable shoes. The elevators are going to be very crowded for the next few days. The beauty of infrastructure is its invisibility. When everything works properly, you don't even notice it exists. Doors open automatically. Air stays cool. Elevators arrive promptly. Internet flows at fiber optic speed. People assume these are natural laws of physics, not carefully engineered services provided by experienced professionals. On the 42nd floor, the laws of physics were about to change dramatically. It started gradually around 3:30 p.m. The smart glass in Ashley's executive conference room, the expensive electrochromic panels that could frost over for privacy at the touch of a button, stopped responding to commands. Without my server providing authentication signals, the glass reverted to its default transparent state. Ashley was in the middle of a heated phone call with her logistics coordinator, pacing back and forth while gesticulating wildly. Suddenly, the entire open-plan office could see her private meltdown through what had become a transparent fishbowl. I watched the security feed from my office. It was like silent theater, and Ashley was the unwitting star performer. Then the biometric door locks began failing. The interior doors separating the developer bullpen from the executive wing were secured by fingerprint scanners that routed through my authentication server. I disabled their access privileges. The doors didn't lock permanently. That would violate fire safety codes. Instead, they failed to their safe position, unlocked and unable to latch. Ashley's exclusive executive sanctuary was suddenly open to everyone. Junior developers wandered in looking confused. The noise from the sales floor, ringing phones, casual conversations, the constant clicking of keyboards flooded into her previously quiet refuge. But the real crisis began at 4:15 p.m. when the temperature started climbing. I have a comprehensive dashboard monitoring all tenant service requests. Usually they route to building management, but since I own the infrastructure, I receive copies of anything flagged as critical priority. The alerts started cascading across my screens. Ticket number 1947, server room temperature alert, current 78 degrees and rising. Ticket number 1848, executive bathroom access denied, keycards not functioning. Ticket number 1849, internet connectivity degraded, packet loss approaching 45%. Ashley had called me tech grandpa, but she didn't understand what actually powered her technology. Their fiber connection was a managed bandwidth allocation. Without my traffic prioritization protocols, their massive data uploads were now competing equally with every other tenant, including the dental clinic on the 12th floor that was backing up digital x-rays to cloud storage. Ashley's video conferences started looking like 8-bit video game graphics from 1985. My email chimed with a new message from Ashley. Subject line, system glitch urgent. Hey, the AC seems broken and some door locks aren't working right. Can you take a quick look? We really need this fixed before our investor call at 5. Thanks. No apology. No acknowledgement that she had publicly fired me 3 hours earlier. Just another demand for immediate service, as if I were still on her personal IT support team. I archived the message without responding and labeled it unauthorized service request from terminated client. My phone rang 10 minutes later. Scott, sounding panicked. Jason, he whispered urgently. She's down in the lobby screaming at Anthony. Claims the building systems are attacking her company. She's demanding that Patrick from maintenance hack the thermostat to restore cooling. Patrick can't hack the thermostat, I replied calmly. It's protected by 256-bit military-grade encryption and hardwired into the building's central management system. I designed it that way specifically to prevent unauthorized access. She's threatening to sue the building for breach of habitability, Scott continued. The base lease guarantees climate control for human occupancy. 74 degrees maximum, I explained. It makes no promises about cooling high-density server farms. That was covered under our infrastructure addendum, the one she rejected when she fired me. By 5:30 p.m., the server room temperature had reached 84 degrees. Automated safety protocols kicked in, throttling the processing speeds of their equipment to prevent permanent heat damage. The Series B investor presentation they were frantically trying to upload crawled across the internet slower than dial-up connections from 1995. While Ashley's world was literally overheating, I was having dinner at the Capitol Grill with Kevin Hoffman, CEO of TechFlow Consulting. Kevin had been trying to secure premium office space in Phoenix Financial Tower for over 2 years, but Gary Reynolds had consistently outbid them for the best available suites. I have an interesting opportunity, I told Kevin, over perfectly grilled steaks. High-priority infrastructure capacity just became available. Military-grade reliability, dedicated fiber backbone, redundant cooling systems. Kevin's eyes lit up. I thought Innovate Labs had that locked up for years. The tenant representative terminated the service provider this afternoon, I said carefully. Effective immediately. I slid a contract across the table. Kevin didn't ask for gossip or details. He was smart enough to focus on the business opportunity. How soon can you transfer the services? He asked. Your team can be operational by tomorrow morning, I replied. Full bandwidth allocation, priority cooling, the complete package. Kevin signed a 5-year agreement worth $900,000 before we finished our wine. I had just sold Ashley's infrastructure capacity to her biggest competitor. The fiber cables would run directly through the 42nd floor ceiling to reach Kevin's 18th floor offices. Ashley would literally sit beneath the high-speed internet she used to have, listening to it hum while it worked for someone else. The final domino fell Monday morning when the electronic keycard system expired. Security badges require network authentication every 72 hours. Without my server providing updates, every Innovate Labs employee was locked out of their own office. I watched from the lobby as Ashley stood with her entire team at the security turnstiles, swiping expired badges that beeped with rejection. Anthony, following protocol, refused entry without valid credentials. "You!" Ashley screamed when she saw me walk through the lobby with my master access card. "You're doing this!" "I'm not doing anything," I replied calmly. "Your security system requires network authentication. You terminated your network services. No network means no security access." Gary Reynolds called for an emergency meeting that afternoon. He offered double the contract value to restore services immediately. I explained that the infrastructure capacity had already been sold to another client with a binding 5-year agreement. Within 6 weeks, Innovate Labs had relocated to a strip mall office in suburban Plano. Ashley was promoted to Regional Director of Special Projects at their new satellite location, a fancy title for exile to a place where the internet barely reaches broadband speeds. TechFlow moved into the 42nd floor and became an ideal tenant. Kevin's people submit proper service requests, treat building staff respectfully, and understand that infrastructure requires professional expertise, not entitled demands. I was reviewing building systems in my office recently when Kevin stopped by with his nephew, a 22-year-old computer science graduate starting his internship. "This is Jason Martinez," Kevin told the young man. "He's the reason our servers never go down and our internet never lags. First rule of working here. When Jason talks about infrastructure, you listen and learn." The kid nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir, Mr. Martinez. Thank you for keeping everything running. Respect, professional courtesy, recognition of expertise earned through decades of experience. It's amazing how much better business runs when people understand the difference between authority and competence." Ashley learned that lesson the hard way, along with the fact that calling someone tech grandpa can be very expensive when that grandpa controls the power switch.